Okay, welcome to the next lesson. And we textured this one and we're ready to move on to the next one, which is Borg. Of course, I call it Borg because these are basically Borgs, but not the one that you have in mind. For example, we're not creating three Borgs in here. We're only going to create something like this, okay? And this is going to be our main reference and it's a great picture and I'm going to use it. So first, I'm not going to do anything with these planks for now. So let's go and hide them. And it makes the substance experience a lot more enjoyable, hiding these layers to get a little bit of performance back. So let's come in here and delete this and apply a default layer. And I'm going to only activate the color and make it red. And then I'm going to copy this, and every time I paste I'm getting this layer, as you know from previous chapters. I have this one with obvious colors so that every time I paste it and paste some mask I know what is going on, and then come back, change the color, do some roughness variation, height and things like that to bake the material. Okay, let's go and create. So let's first copy this and come into here, and I'm going to make the color something like this. Okay, let's pick this color. Very good, something brownish. And then we're going to have a lot of color swatches like this that are worn wood and things like that. You see there are a lot of discoloration and desaturation happening in here, and we're going to cover all of that. And of course, for these details I really like to put something in these, but these are some generic props that are going to be repeated over and over again. So I'm not going to put any obvious detail in them. So of course the roughness needs a bit of tweaking. So let's put it to something like this. I'm really not going to push the roughness so rough so that it doesn't reflect any light back. I'm going to always add a bit of reflectivity in here. No matter how small it is, there should be something, even in the roughest materials. So let's go again and pick this one, or let's again go to filter and bring the contrast, make it a bit contrasty with lesser luminosity. Okay, I'm happy with this one. And now let's select that again, add a black mask, and in black mask add a fill. So you see there are a lot of directionality in here happening in here. I'm going to, just like the previous one, I'm going to add some directionality to this. So let's go and find a grunge map that is a bit directional. Okay, this grunge map 5 and grunge map 2 are working all right. So this one is a bit bark like, something like I want really. So let's go and see what we can do about it. Let's visit the mask. So this is the mask. I'm going to alter the mask so that every time I alter the mask, the red disappears and appears as well. So let's come in here and increase the tiling to something like this. This is starting to look good. And because the texture density is the same all across, we are getting perfect result every time. And although this one is bigger than this one, but the whole grunge is the same size in here and the same size in here, no matter how big and you small the UVs are, because they are both belonging to the same texture density. So that's this is what I'm going for. And now let's go for balance and make it something like this. And for contrast, I'm not really going to make it contrasty because I want to have a lot of shift in here. You see, this is nor red or nor brown. This is something in between. So let's see inverted. This inverted appears to be a lot noisy and good, but let's see what we select first. So from the color palette, let's pick something like this, and this is perfect for adding those swatches. And now let's come in here, see if I can invert it. Now let's keep that, and I'm going to alter the color a bit. Add a filter, and in here bring the HSL node, so make it a bit darker. Let's change the hue to something, or bring the saturation up. And then after this, let's add a filter again and go for contrast and add a bit of contrast into this. Okay, something like this would be fine. And now let me disable these and pick another color from here. I'm going for something darker than the value that we have below this. So activate this one again, and this one is going to be good. And I do not want it to be so reflective. So add the roughness and make it a bit non-reflective. And I'm going to add the height as well to give this a bit of height variation in here as well. So for the height, let me see what I can do with this. Bringing this out or bringing in. I'm only making this something like this. Yeah, this one is good. And now let's make it rougher. And for the color, let's go for something like this and delete this HSL and bring a new one instead. And this one creates a bark-like thing that I really like about it. So let's change the hue to something, I believe something a bit darker would do to make this more bark-like. Saturated, and something like this is alright. Of course, this is now become too intense on the height. Let's go to height channel and bring this down just a bit, something like this, so that we have something to work with. Okay, I'm happy with the height placement on here, and now let's add a new layer, and we still need to add more directionality into this. So let's go into these grunges, add a fill, and I'm going to copy this so that I have the mask and the fill at the same time. So let's pick one of those grunges. The 2 was great. The grunge map 2 was doing good. This is it, okay? This is going to do alright in some places and not in some place else. So let's give it a bit of tiling. Alter the tiling to see if we like the result or not, and we can also invert the result. Something like this. Some overall grunge and dirt will make it fine. And now this is 2CG. Let's go in here and add a fill, add a filter. And in here I'm going to bring warp to make it a bit more random, something like the bark that you see there. Okay, this is alright. Let's go and pick a color from here. Something like this would be alright, but I really want to make that another color. Something really light I want to pick. So this is good. And now let's add the height. And in the height, I'm going to bring this in. Okay. And now the height is doing good as well. Let's bring the roughness and bring it so high. So let's go to different modes. This is about the base color. This is the roughness. And this is the height. You see there's going in here and poking out in some places else. And this is normal map. And I believe the normal is too intense for now. I really do not want it to be too intense. So in the height category, I'm bringing the height of that. Now this is doing alright. I'm bringing this one down to something like this, okay? And bring this one also down in heights so that normal map isn't so intense. So this is doing good. And now let's bring this and compare them. Yeah, the color is different and I want that to be just like that. I don't want them to belong to the same family because they are not. So let's hide this and go again to bring something directional more. Okay, paste this, and from the procedurals in here I'm going to go and see what directionality we have. These two we have used, and let's search for directional. Here we have something directional in here as well. So this directional noise is very fine, but it's overall too strong. Let's go and rotate it 90 degrees to face the direction of the objects and bring the balance down just a bit. We want something that adds a bit of directionality in here to give it not only the color differentiation but also some roughness and things that in that nature. So let's pick a color from this. This one I'm going for something darker than the whole shade. For example, from here, let's compare it before and after. Overall, adding a bit of darkness into this. So bring the roughness and make it pretty rough. And bring the height as well. And I'm going to make it go in instead of bringing this out. And see, it adds some good amount of directional fibers in here. And I believe that I can bring this down and not to make it so intense. Okay, something like this is good. And I'm going to make this so noisy because the story that I'm taking for this is these belong to the dog, and the dog has been well used for so much of time. And these are so old and noisy. Okay, let's paste this and again go for some directionality in here. These are not really belonging to what I want, but they will do in adding some general noise. So contrast down. Let me increase the tiling to make it go all over the place. And I'm going to add another fill. And in here, I'm going to take this, for example, and let's rotate it. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. Of course, I tiled this too much. Let's see, and I can make this multiply. Let's see, multiply and then subtract. Yeah, the subtract is doing better, but let's bring the subtract down so that we get something in here as well. We have some really contrasty places and some places that it contributes to the changing of the shade of the texture. So let's take this and I'm going to give this a really color like this. Okay, this is good. And now for the roughness, I'm going to make it rough, of course. And let's give it a bit of height in negative direction. Okay, you see now these are going in. For example, they have been carved from the surface of the wood. And this is really good for my taste. So let's change this, and this is really starting to look good. And I'm going to enable this, bring the tiling down to something more reasonable like 4, and let's make the subtract less stronger, not 100, adding some level of surface noise. And this is doing alright. So let's go in here. I'm really liking this, I want to keep it. So let's watch here also. Okay, this is fine. And now let's add here, and again I'm going to now go for these wood carvings that you see here being separated a lot in the surface. So let's go in here, and I'm going to pick a directional noise, something like this. But the thing is that I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and one thing that I can do is tile it too much. And for the tiling, I'm not going to tile it with each other. I'm going to tile them separately so that I can tile this to be 1 and this one to be all the way to top, and something like this. And then in here I'm going to use some of them only, and this will be great when we turn it into a black one. I'm going to make it fairly dark, and of course it's going to be pretty rough. And the height also, I'm going to bring the height down to create something like these effects that you see in here. So this is good, but let's make it not so visible. Okay, let's pick a dark color from here, and I'm going to add levels, and using levels I'm able to manipulate the mask. You see the mask is here like this, so let's go to levels to see if we can take some of that out. So something like this, and this is alright. I'm only going to make it darker a bit. And here let's add a bit of contrast to that. Let's make it contrasty more to be visited more. And after this I'm going to bring a filter, and in this filter again I'm going to warp this just a bit so that we have a bit of break up and naturality into this. Let's compare that before and after and see this is too CG looking, but this makes it really perfect for adding those stripes of broken wood. So this is good, and now let's see. Let's create a folder and Control G to group them and call this wood overall, because I decided this one to have overall noises and things like that. And let's call this wood, and in here select these and Control G to make it a subfolder to this one, because later on we might change this one to something like bark wood and turn it into a smart material. So let's call this one overall directionality. So this is about it, and let's create another folder, and in this one we're going to add surface noises and things that make it a bit more natural. Okay, let's go in here, call this one surface noise. And again, I'm going to paste that in here. And now we're going to select from the grunges that are not so directional, but also those that have overall noise to them. So procedural, let's, if you type this, you're getting all of the procedurals that is in here. So let's pick up from grunge maps that we have in here in our arsenal. For example, select this. I'm going to select all of them to see if I like the effect or not. If I liked it, I manipulate it and do some things with it. And if I didn't like it, I really change it to something else. So let's go for color and to see what we like about this. You see, it adds a bit of these black swatches in here, which I like really. Discoloration and things like that happening. So for the roughness, I'm going to make it reflective, like it has been painted just now and not too old. Okay, and for the height, let's make it a bit poking out, like they have been painted, and have a bit of color volume into this. So see, it's like been painted just now. So let's come in here, and for the grunge map, let's bring the balance up. I don't want to make it too strong, just something that can hold the place. Okay, this is starting to become noisy and I really like that to be like this. So let's add a paint layer, and in here I'm going to call it sharpness, just like the previous one. I'm going to make it pass through and add a filter to this and select sharpen. And now it overall sharpens the texture for us. This is good, but I'm going to just keep some of it and not make it too noisy and unnatural. So something like this before and after, it adds a bit of resolution and sharpness to the texture that we have here. So like again, let's paint that. And from the grunges, let's go and see what we need. And this one, I believe I can bring the contrast all the way to top. And let's see the mask. This is good for adding some color swatches in here as well. So let's make it not so rough and pick a color from here. Something like this, something like overall color that we can add to this. Okay, and for the height, I'm going to bring this just a bit out, not so much, just a bit. So again, add that, and then when I'm finished with adding these procedurals, I go to this smart masks and generate some masks that are based on the geometry and make these textures so localized and belong to the geometry. These are some procedurals that get repeated over and over again, no matter how the geometry is. So let's go for this. I believe this will make some perfect color swatches. Yeah, this is something that I really like. You can add some moss into this using this. So again, let's go and add a filter after that. You can really invest your time in this filter to see what you really like. So let's warp it a bit. Okay, and this effect is overall too strong. Let's make it a bit weaker. But of course we have something in here which I can add a mask and try to chip away some of it using procedurals and subtracting a procedural from that. So I'm picking someone randomly, tiling so much, and set it to multiply or subtract. Okay, and now let's pick a color from these areas. This one makes a perfect color combination. Like the color, like the wood has been chipped off and losing a lot of things. So I'm gonna make it pure rough, and I'm going to bring the height in as well and make this go in just a bit, like the wood have been carved by some people. Of course, this is too strong, and I'm going to go for this, and let's see, without subtract, but let's see if I can make the subtract not so intense. Yeah, this one is good. And I'm going to make the color a bit brighter. So let's come in here and try to pick something from here. Okay, this one is alright, but I'm going to make it a bit weaker in terms of color and go for something stronger. Okay, this one is doing alright. Okay, and I feel like we are getting there, and only need to add some more color variation. You see, the base color is so rich and good looking. Okay, let's see what we can add, and then later on we go to add these geometry based smart masks. So add this one again, and from the procedurals, these procedurals are really powerful inside Substance, really powerful. So let's pick up something. Okay, something like this, and visit the mask. It's obvious that we need to introduce a bit of tiling to make it visible, and then bring the balance down to something like this, and let's invert it. Let's see if it has an invert or not. No. And this is too strong for now. So let's add another procedural, add a fill, and randomly select the procedural to subtract or multiply the effect to make it weaker. So for this one also, I'm going to pick a color from this. Something like this, creamy color. Okay, and visit the color. This is really what I'm happy with. I really can go more and try to invest more in texturing this, but I feel like this is already looking good for my taste. And now I'm going to add those smart masks to make this a bit more beautiful. So let's add another color and try to test the smart mask to see what we come up with. So this is good, and now let's go to mask operations and try to bring the global balance down just a bit to make sure that we have selected a bit of these curvature areas. Or I can simply remove this and use one of another edge that we have in this mask section, something that is not too CG. For example, this one, edge of strong, is pretty CG and it's going to give us unnatural results everywhere. So I'm going to add something that has a lot of noise and weaknesses and strengths into this. So this one is alright and it's going to be perfect. Let's go into the color, and for edges, always I'm going to pick some color that is a bit whiter than the rest to highlight the edges more. So something like this, but I need to add some contrast to the mask, not to the color itself, to the mask, to make it not going so much outwards and inwards. So add some contrast. So let's see this. So this is not working for me. I'm going to pick up something else. And a lot of time it happens. You create something and you're not happy with it and you delete it. It happens a lot of time. So this one is better. Of course, the effect now is too strong overall. I'm going to go into the global section and bring it down. Something like this to add white swatches on areas that the curvature map has baked for us. So bring the contrast down and bring this one up a bit. I'm going to bring this up, but you see this effect is too strong. So I'm going to add a fill and using one of these grunge maps, for example, this one, let's give it a bit of tiling. And now I'm going to again make this to multiply. Let's see before and after. You see it has removed some of the intense mask that we have there. Okay, this is alright. And now let's after that filter again, warp the effect a bit. Not so much, just a tiny bit. And now overall I will leave the color is too intense. Let's bring it down just a bit. So let's come in here and try to paste some other mask to test them to see what they do. One of those ones that I always use is this one. It's pretty awesome. These two produce great results when it comes to texturing. So instead of that, let's delete this, the paint layer, and I'm going to set it to pass through and a black mask and paste this mask into it. And now I've set this to pass through. Let's go into filter and add the contrast or a hue saturation. Let's go to filters and hue saturation, delete that. We can add a bit of darkening in here using that. Let's check that before and after. Just a bit of overall darkening. And of course I can come in here and overall make the effect stronger just a bit. Not so much. So let's check before and after. Okay, this is alright. And now I'm going to add some extra touches for highlighting the edges to see them better. So let's add another layer. No. I'm going to pick something that highlights the edges for us. No, I'm not going for that. This spots also gives us some random spots, but I'm not going to use that because I'm going to finish this using this edge picker. Okay, this one is good. And it's obvious that we need to make the effect less stronger. So let's delete all of the surface noises except for the areas where the mask separation is so obvious. So let's go in here and give this a white color from here. Not from here, let's go for something like this that is a bit less saturated. So this is it for adding some contrast to the edges compared to the whole thing. So I'm feeling alright about this. So before and after, again I'm going to bring in a filter and pick up a random noise to subtract from this mask. Okay, let's set the mode to subtract and compare before and after this mask. You see, it makes the effect less stronger, but let's make it something like this. And I'm going for a brighter color for the edges. And not so bright, but this is going to be alright. And I'm going to bring the whole color down a bit. And one thing that I can clearly see there is that a lot of these woods are a bit discolorated in tops and bottom because they get hit and they are more exposed to open air and they get a lot of discoloration in there. So let's add a filter in here, add a paint layer and set it to pass through and add a black mask. So in here I'm going to add a filter and I'm going to first use HSL to brighten the whole thing up, but of course we need to give it a mask. So, and this is because we have made these vertical. We can use this mask, this mask from top. If I set it to be here and go to mask options, you see it's a lot more heavier in top and less strong on bottom. So I'm going to change it a lot. First bring the contrast down, and do not want it to be so intense. And then let's go to view. No, this isn't working. So I'm going to delete this and bring in a color and use that in here instead of using a layer, a paint layer. So let's make it not so strong. I just want it on some places. And then let's say that I'm happy with how this is going. But first I'm going to make this not so visible and change the color to something a bit more towards the wood. So something like this. And now we need to fix something because the effect is so strong all over the place and I really do not want that. So let's go in here. On top of this one, I'm going to add a paint layer. And this paint layer allows us to paint black and white data in here. If I start to paint, I'm getting white. And if I start pressing X, you see it's turning to black. And if I press X, I'm going to delete from this. So I'm going to pick one of these, for example, this one, or one of these dirt ones, and start to remove from the mask using these brushes so that the effect only happens on top parts, not the whole mesh. So first make it bigger and try to paint so that we only isolate the top parts, not the body parts. So let's see. And of course, another thing that we can do is going into 2D mode in here and start to paint in here as well. It's a lot easier due to the flatness of the UV shells. So now let's see before and after, or I can go in mask mode and try to remove from here. It's a lot more obvious in here. So I only want these parts to have the data, and of course these cap parts. So let's delete the effect from the body of barks. And because this brush is really a dirt one and not a CG one, it helps. So let's go back and see the effect, and you see the top parts are hit as well. So another thing that I'm going to do is duplicate this layer on bottom, but instead of this time adding the dirt from top, I'm going to add the dirt from below, this ground dirt, so that we hit these bottom parts as well. So before and after, let me see if I have anything, for example this ground dirt instead of that. It's overall too strong. Let's go and decrease the effect just a bit to isolate it to this bottom part. So let's see on and off. Or what we can do is try to add a paint layer in here, add a paint, and start to paint some of these parts. Because it's a lot flatter in here and easier to sculpt on. So I'm only going to paint on top and bottom of individual islands to get the paint effect that I really want. So you see it's happening in here and in here as well, and I'm going to paint on cap parts as well. But overall I'm not going to make it too strong. I'm going to make it a bit more calm later on. So, and I'm going to hit X and remove some of the parts randomly. Or I can bring another grunge on top of this by adding a fill layer, and for example this grunge large, and I start to multiply so that it's not overall too strong, so that it chips some of that away. So let's use subtract and bring the subtract down a bit, and now go into here and start to paint on some parts to reveal more of that. And that is taken effect. Okay, this is good. And now overall I'm going to here and make the effect less stronger. Okay, and now let's see if I can pick another color to make this differentiated from that as well. So come into here and try to pick another color that is a bit different than that. Not totally different, but something that we can guess. Okay, something like that. Let's bring the visibility on. Okay, and now I only want the color, and roughness needs to be high pretty much, and let's see if I can add a subtle amount of height. Not so much, just a bit. Okay, this is it. And now I feel like I can go and manipulate these parts more. Let's go to paint and I start to chip away some of these parts. Overall, not to make the effect too strong, because in some places the effect is happening too strong. And I do not want that to be all over the place. For example, these parts in here. And generally on all of these parts. So let's make the subtract a bit stronger, something like this. Okay, this is the wood that we get. Let's go to 3D view and let's start to compare it with the planks that we have. So bring the planks, and I'm totally happy with how this is going. Okay, and now I'm going to export this and test it inside Unreal to see what we have created so far. I'm going to rename these and add the doc before both of them because the name is descriptive but not descriptive enough. I'm going to add this so that it's alphabetically easier to find these inside Unreal Engine. So the dog before them, bark, and then planks. So let's go and export. And first I gave it a name, an output directory. And then we need to choose an output template. We can go ahead and use one of these UE4 packed ones, and that works alright, but we need to do a couple of variations. Let's go and find the UE packed in here, and now you see in here in the normal, this is what the normal map is. It exports the DirectX normal, and we do not want that. So I'm going to drag this in here and replace it with the OpenGL normal. So it's not allowing me, so I'm going to right click on this and hit duplicate, and then here I write OpenGL. And this DirectX by default is the best when exporting to Unreal Engine, but since a lot of softwares that I use to author content use OpenGL, then I'm going to create OpenGL and then later on make it DirectX inside Unreal Engine. So let's drag the OpenGL in here and done. And now in the templates, I'm going to pick up this Unreal Engine packed OpenGL. And the file type is going to be also dependent on the output template, which is PNG. And then in here, I'm going to go before the names and add T underscore. And T underscore is a naming convention that I keep always to rename my textures to. For example, this T underscore, the name of the mesh, and then the name of the texture. So it tells me that it's a texture, belongs to what mesh, and belongs to what texture set. So it's good to keep it. And this emissive, although we do not have any emissive, I'm going to keep this. And for the channel pack texture, it exports this channel pack texture for us and has R, G, and B. The R channel is going to export the mix AO, and it means that the initial AO that we bake and whatever we added in here, and then green is going to be roughness and blue is going to be metallic. Of course, I can change the order, but this is really what I'm going to. So everything all right. And for the size, I'm going to set it to 4K. Of course, I believe it's going to have a bit of calculations because the document size is 2K and it needs to upscale them. And set the padding to be dilation infinite so that it fills the empty spaces of the UVs with the color from the textures. So as far as the exporting, this is good. And let's hit export to export. And this is the result that we're getting from export. This is the base color, this is normal, of course OpenGL, and this is the channel pack texture, which contains 3 channels, one for AO, one for metallic, and one for ambient occlusion. And then this one is for the planks, of course the normal of the planks and the channel packed. And then I'm going to import this inside Unreal Engine and start to create the first material. And here we are in Unreal Engine. Let's go in here and always try to stick to the folder structure that you have. Let's create a folder and call it textures, and I'm going to import those textures in this folder. So these are the textures. Let's select them and import them all together. And it imported them without any problem, and there are some things that we need to do. First, let's select the normal maps and open them. The normal map is now in OpenGL and we need to convert it into DirectX. And we do that by coming in here. Let's show all advanced details. And in here, there's a flip green channel option that you can use to convert this into a DirectX normal map. And for this one as well, let's convert it to DirectX by flipping the green channel. Of course, because we have authored this one in OpenGL, flipping this will result in a DirectX normal map. If it's by default a DirectX normal map, you really do not need to do anything. And as for the channel mask textures, these ones, I'm going to come in here, and for the compression I'm going to set it to mask, because if I set it to the default one, the sRGB color correction is going to happen, and it's going to alter the metallic roughness and AO that we created, and I do not want that. You see, it's sRGB in here, and it's going to alter some of the colors, and we really do not want that. So let's change it to mask, and done, and save them all safely. And now we're ready to first create the material. And we will create the material in the next lesson. Okay, see you there. And before going to the next chapter, I really went on and created a simple material that is a simple material. It's nothing too complicated. I plugged in the base color in here, normal in its socket, and this one R goes into AO, green goes into roughness, and blue goes into metallic. I just wanted to see if that works or not. Then I converted them into parameter. If you create a texture sampler and right click on it and convert it into parameter and name it something, then later on you can create material instance and take material instances from that and create any type of variation that you want. And I found that there are a couple of problems that I need to fix before creating materials. One is these white swatches that we added are a little bit too strong, and I need to make it a bit weaker. Overall, it's too strong and making the color look really off in some points. And one is about these. If I come into here, you see we used a couple of kit sets basically to create this. One from the plank, which is working all right, and one for the bark, which the texture isn't going to look all right in here. You see, the texture is nothing like we planned it, and that is why when we tried to export this from Blender, we didn't check that one single material. We should turn that off because this contains two set of materials, one for bark and one for the planks. And this one is an easier fix. We're going to first do this and then color correct this part inside Substance Painter. And then later on, we create a sophisticated master material to cover all of these. So this is one of the Blender files that I kept and not deleted in case. And now this has been useful. And always try to keep backup files from your project. So these are the files that we exported with one material ID. And if I select it and go into this material section, you see there are a couple of material IDs in here. And also here, but not here because this is only the bark. So no matter what, we're going to uncheck this because we are going to export this with two material IDs instead of one, or how many material IDs we have, that doesn't matter. So the folder setup is corrected also, and the sensor transform and apply transform are also doing their job. So let's hit export, and this should really fix the problem, and it's going to export with two material IDs so that we can use them later on. So this one exported successfully, and let's select this and export this one as well. And this one is going to take a little bit shorter because it's a smaller piece compared to this. Okay, this one exported as well. And now let's come in here and select this, open it in here, and we're going to right click and hit re-import to see if it fixes the problem or not. We should get a couple of material IDs in the static mesh editor section. So this is an indication to say that we are going right. It's adding this material ID and we're setting it to reset to FBX, and it's going to correct the file for us. And now let's come into here into static mesh editor, And now we have a couple of material IDs. One is for that and one for the wood planks, barks, excuse me. And the bark is now working perfectly, but the color needs to be alright at some point. So let's go for the next one, which are these ones, this 6x6 kit. Let's find the static mesh and re-import it. And now this is giving us this message, which we need to hit reset to FBX. And now this one corrected as well. Let's go to static mesh editor and change this here so that it changes to every instance that happens in the world. So let's come into here, and for this one I'm going to select that one, and it worked perfectly and without any problem. And you see these bark pieces are doing their job perfectly. So now what we have to do is opening Substance Painter and color correct this a bit, export and re-import a bit to see the colors match a bit better. And then when we made sure that the values and these white colors are working perfect, we go to the material creation in the next chapter. So this one is in Substance. Let's come in here and see the layers to see what they do. This one is adding a bit of white, so let's make it down a bit, not a bit, very high. You need to really bring it down very high. So let's go to export textures, and everything is set up in here for us from previous sessions. So I'm going to deselect planks and only export the barks. So hit export, and now in here let's find the texture files. Go into textures, and this bark we need to right click and re-import them. It's gonna take a bit of time to calculate. So I believe a bit of that whiteness is gone, and now we need to go and do some more dramatic changes. So in Substance Painter, let's see the layers responsible for that, and that is the layer that is really responsible for giving us all of those whites. So let's come in here, and we need to tone this down pretty much. We need to just keep something really subtle and not so dramatic. So let's export this again, and in here let's re-import these three ones to see what they do. And now it's doing better, I believe, comparing to what was before. Yeah, the color values are not that much radical for now, and they're looking good. Of course, for some places we might do a little bit more work to do. For example, coming in here, look at the colors, and this one is absolutely too crazy. Let's bring this down to something in quarter and export it again. And there are a lot of going back and forth between Substance and Unreal every time I try to export textures to get perfect results. So export it, and now let's go to Unreal, and I believe this time we should get perfect. So let's first check the diffuse color, and it's doing alright. And a lot of those crazy annoying whites are gone now, and they were from that last one that we deleted. So let's re-import these two as well to correct the normal roughness AO and metallic. Okay, they're doing good, and let's check them to see if they're working all right here. Okay, this is doing fine. So some last bit of final touches inside Substance. If you look at this part, you see these whites are a bit too CG looking, and I need to do some really random manipulations. So you see in here, there are a lot of things happening. Let's see what layer is driving this information. It's this one, and let's bring it down just a bit. We really do not want it to be so strong. And let's see the mask. And of course, we need to bring the subtract a bit up. Not that much, it really washes the whole effect. We need to go for something like this. So let's export this one as well. The wood plank is doing alright because it doesn't need really any changes, but this one absolutely needed some last minute touches, and it's really a fine thing. Sometimes you have to do some last minute changes to make sure that it's reading perfect throughout. So it's now reading a lot better and not having those kind of white annoying colors. And we are ready to move on to the material creation part. So see you in material creation.